Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of the Comics Pals Book Club. But before we start, a disclaimer. If you value your lives, you must not listen to this podcast. In about an hour and a half or so, you'll find out exactly why. Well, you're still listening, so do so at your own risk. This month, the Pals will be talking about one of Grant Morrison's many magnum opuses, the Multiversity. It's a 9-issue limited series of one-shots with multiple different artists that ran from August 2014 through August 2015. If you guys decide that you like today's show, make sure you listen to our weekly show that drops every Monday wherever your podcasts are sold, along with many things we put out. Like and subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and join us in our Discord, where you can find that in the description below. I'm joined by three other pals today. All of us are from Universe 69. I got Sean here.
Nice.
Hello, hello.
Pete.
Nice.
And, Cal.
Nice.
All right, guys. So today I had you all read Multiversity. I don't think any of us have read it except maybe Cal and myself. Is that true? Sean, have you read it?
Nope.
Excellent.
Not even now.
I'm sorry, wait. Phil, in which universe are you asking have I read it?
Well, have you read it in Universe 15?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know myself in that universe
That's
that
right.
well. But in 69, I have read it, so.
Nice.
Previous to this, I have only actually read the Shazam issue.
Okay.
Oh.
I see you've talked about that many times that I assume that you read the whole thing. So, all right. Yeah, we're in for a
And
treat.
I guess before we get into it, you guys know my Fred Quietly story, right? I went to see him one time at Hope Street Studios, where he works in Glasgow, with a friend who got a pull quote from him for her comic. And he showed us the pages he was working on for Pax Americana.
Oh, that's cool.
Ruled.
That's really cool.
I'm really excited to talk
parts were
about.
Great.
Yeah, that's a great section of the story. Did you guys have any initial impressions going in? Let's start with you, Sean. You like me worship the altar of Grant Morrison.
Yeah, you guys can't see it. It's a bit off screen, but I do have a massive altar
Looks
to
like
Grant
behind you.
Morrison.
Doesn't look the incense is burning right now, though. That's pretty weird.
Looks like the map right behind the Multiversity map right behind you there.
No, that's Vegeta. I knew only that it was very dense and confusing and Morrison-y, and it didn't disappoint in any of those aspects at all.
Yeah, fair enough. Pete, I know you're hot and cold on Grant. What were your feelings going in? What were you expecting?
I don't know what my expectations were going in necessarily, because to your point, I am pretty hot and cold on Grant's stuff, because I think where I get tripped up with their work sometimes is like I like the idea more than the execution.
Okay.
And I do think that this is an example of that.
Oh, you're teasing.
But I will say I think that this work, because it is so vast and each issue is so different, I think that there are peaks and valleys in it. And there are peaks that I very much enjoyed. And I think it's more some of the mechanics of it that where I felt like sometimes I could see the wheels turning, that I felt that kind of frustration or trepidation I feel like I do sometimes feel with Grant's work. So I am anticipating being the naysayer on this one, even though I did like it a fair amount, I would say.
Okay. And Kel, you've only read Thunderworld Adventures. Now you've read all 9 issues. What do you think? I almost backed the horse up here. What were your expectations of the rest of it? That's what we're talking about here.
Put the cart before the horse.
That's right.
So the one I was looking forward to the most was Pax Americana.
Okay.
Just because that was the one I'd heard about the most. And it's one I would like to actually take more time with, because I felt like I had other commitments, so I couldn't get to the book to really dig deep into it over the weekend. So I blew through it today. As thick as this book is, it's an easy read somehow. But Pax Americana is thick and layered, and
You're supposed to read it backwards.
I feel like I missed it a lot. So that's so there's that. But yeah, the rest of it, similar to Pete, there were very high highs, but I was lukewarm on a lot of it. There's a lot of Grant Morrison-y stuff that when it works for me, it really, really works. But then you get stuff where it feels like he's trying to like imitate pop culture. When Grant is trying to imitate pop culture, it just never hits with me.
All right, let me. All right, go ahead, Sean.
The other two spoke on their feelings about the book, and I didn't. So
sure, yeah.
Add that.
Yeah, go for it.
If it were up to me, my first experience with any Grant Morrison anything would never be. I would never be talking about my opinion publicly for my first read through, because I don't think that Grant's work is meant to be read and talked about that way, and I don't think that they write that way. And I think certainly this book it requires you to really sit and ruminate and think about it and read it again, and that's not how I did it. So whatever I'm gonna say in this episode is probably not what I'll think about it if you were to ask me again in a year or two. That being said, I think that there were times where I just couldn't help but smile when nothing particular was happening in the book, because there's a certain way that Grant writes that I can't get enough of. And it doesn't have to be a major moment. It's just their style that I'm obsessed with. And there were other moments where I was like, okay, yep, guess I am not clear on what's going on here. I don't have a clue what I'm reading.
Yes.
But I'll read it anyway because it's Grant. So there's nothing that I outright disliked. Far from it. But I would say that I didn't get everything I was supposed to get. Probably not even half of everything I was supposed to get out of this.
Yeah, I would say the parts that are the most dense, and you guys will probably feel the same way, are the two issues of Multiversity themselves. 1 and 2, the beginning and the very last chapter of the book. And Grant, they're laying down some kind of heady concepts here that have to do with the gentry. But really where the book really sings are these 7 middle chapters, because really what this story is about, to me at least, is it's opportunity for stories to bloom, because everything the gentry is supposed to represent in these issues are where bad ideas infest comic books, or where good ideas go to die. And so these 7 issues in the middle are supposed to represent just the endless possibilities that could be within comic books. With that said, let me set the table a little bit here so that we, what we're actually reading here. Multiversity is a story about the DC Comics multiverse that's being invaded by a race of cosmic entities or parasites called the Gentry. And they basically create a comic book called Ultra Comics that they use to infest multiple multiverses within that story, in this comic. And that's kind of the thorough line that takes us from issue to issue. So with that said, of our 7 kind of middle stories, I kind of want to start it this way, because I don't think there's any clean way to kind of go into this. Pete, what was your favorite of our 7 kind of stories here?
So I would say that my favorite was probably Thunderworld Adventures.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really, really good issue. And
Man of taste.
thank you, Kale. So in preparation for this, because of how dense the work is, I had the Wikipedia page open as I was reading all of these. So whenever I would finish the issue, I would read the synopsis and make sure I got everything that I was supposed to get out of it narratively.
Okay.
And the reason I bring that up is because when I was reading the Thunderworld one, there was a quote from Grant where they said that the kind of goal of it was to see if you could kind of present it in this Pixar movie kind of way, similar to what they did with All-Star Superman, and play it as kind of myth folktale kind of thing. And as soon as I read that after I had experienced the issue, my mind immediately went to just man, why has DC not done something like that? A really classic Fleischer inspired kind of cartoon series about the Marvels, because man, is this issue such a good elevator pitch for this universe, and what is cool about it, and the way that it's maintained a lot of that golden age, tone and vibe. And I think the biggest takeaway I got from all of this series, and it happens whenever I read one of Grant's big multiverse type things, is just man, they know so much about comic books. They know a humbling amount about comic books.
And that's really apparent in the guidebook, but
there's so much here. The guidebook actually was a competitor for my favorite, just because, like I said, I think I like the idea of multiversity more than the execution. And that issue is literally just elevator pitches for universes, or Grant being oh, here's this cool universe that this other comic creator made that I'm going to have a thinly veiled nod to,
Yeah, Earth 6, for instance. That's Stan Lee's DC Comics when he, did his version of the DC characters. I thought that was really cool.
I made a list of a bunch of them because I want to do a video about it at some point, because I thought it was so interesting. There's a bunch of nods to different image lines, and Action City, which is I think Kurt Busiek's superhero universe, and it's crazy.
Yeah, I love Thunderworld Adventures though. Cameron Stewart did such a great job with the art, really kind of capturing this kind of this style, so to speak. And it's just brisk. I feel when we talk about a lot of Captain Marvel stories, it always comes back to Black Adam in some way, but this was just purely Dr. Sivana. And the goal of just trying to create an 8th day in the week, Sivana Day, is really campy and silly. There's a good reason why this one's your favorite for sure. How do you guys feel about this? Kale, you were high on this one too, right?
Underworld, yeah. It's the only issue of this I actually bought, because there are so few Captain Marvel stories out in the world. And I knew that I would have to buy it when it came out. And obviously I was not disappointed. Sivana, to me, is the perfect villain for this whole situation. I think there are so few real mad scientist characters anymore that when Sivana gets used, it's just ooh, it's just delicious. Little umami. And I think Grant's use of the character and the multiverse of the character is just so spot on in the way that only Grant could do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Something that I liked about that one a lot too, and you also kind of see it with the use of the mini Justice League universe as well, of the juxtaposition of all these different kinds of tones, because obviously that whole issue is very golden age, but then bringing in the multi verse of Sylvanas?
Sivana.
Oh, the Sivana, Dr. Sivana's.
Yeah, and there's the one who is becomes a recurring character who's got major Hannibal Lecter energy. And he, as a contrast in that issue, I remember he really struck me as being odd because it's like so in this tone until it isn't, you know? And I do like that. I like the moments of that in this series overall.
Yeah, Sean, how do you feel about this issue?
Thunderworld Adventures was great. It was I don't really care that much about Shazam. But it was cool to see Shazam through Grant's eyes. And that's something that is that's one of the major reasons why I love reading Grant's work so much, is because they can take a character that I might not care about or even know exists, and all of a sudden I'm in love.
Sure.
And then another writer takes that same character, and then I don't care again. So that's just a talent that Grant has. And this issue was great, but it wasn't my favorite. No, my favorite was definitely the Ultra Comics issue.
Nice.
That was probably my runner up.
Yeah.
Hit us with it.
That's that Grant stuff.
Mhm.
That's what I thought when this story started. I thought that it was going to be a lot of that, and I guess I was a little bit turned off by, while I think all the stories are good, I was turned off by the fact that they all relate to each other, but the idea that Grant was trying to like set up future stories for other writers to take on, like, I don't even care about that.
Yeah.
And so I wanted a cohesive narrative that works from front to back, that tells a consistent story. So all the offshoot things, while they were good, I was like, I really want to see what is the meta commentary that Grant's making. What is the, how are they going to mess with my brain with this one, And this issue, the Ultra Comics one, does that. The page where I think it's Ultra says, "Do not turn this page."
Yeah.
And then you do.
Yep.
And it's that big eye, like, there you are. That freaked me out.
Absolutely captivated.
Yeah. I love that. I love that type of stuff. And the way it even starts, where it's just like warning you, like, don't turn the page, and how you see the evolution of comic storytelling, the way that this character goes from like thought balloons to the captions. The way you see that, how they start as a hero and they go from golden to silver to modern ages, and the way that changes how they're a hero and all that different stuff. The way that the other characters are kind of like, I feel like they were meant to be like comic readers, and they're cannibals.
Yeah.
Because that's what comic book readers are, right? All of that stuff is what I wanted to read. So that issue gave me exactly what I want. And then you said the first and second, the Multiversity 1 and 2, were really dense. Those were my other favorites.
Nice.
Because that's what I came here for. That's what I want. So the other stuff was cool, but those 3 issues were what I signed up for, and I got what I wanted out of them.
Yeah, you wanted that true quote unquote hyper crisis, as Grant called it, the final crisis stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's what we got here. I mean, there's when we look at Multiversity issues 1 and 2 and Ultra Comics, it's definitely Grant making their commentaries on the industry. The gentry seem to be representative of maybe like executives, editorialship, that kind of thing, bad editors. And I like how when you are reading this, you see like forum commentaries on pages sporadically, and it's all just like kind of negative, like, oh, it's a giant egg, in reference to the big eye you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that stuff too. For me, that was kind of what I came here for. And I also, the first time I read this, was thrown off by how every other issue seemed kind of completely unrelated. But I felt like Grant was trying to. It felt like this was published in 2015, and it felt like there was a lot of jabs at the New 52 era of comics, this kind of revolving door of continuity. And when we read stuff like Thunderworld or Pax Americana, it feels like Grant trying to restore some sense of optimism to the story. So it feels like it's this whole book to me is their idealized comic books, if that makes sense.
I guess I didn't. Again, Pax Americana was probably the one that I got the least out of, and I don't see how that was optimistic. And I guess we'll talk about it, but I didn't get that at all. And again, I'm sure that's because I missed something, but it didn't feel hopeful. And I guess ultimately that's how things resolve, that it is this kind of hopeful ending. But even the way it ends is it's kind of ambiguous in the sense that nothing really resolves, at least not as far as I could tell. I was shocked that it was over when I hit the final page. I was like, wait, what? This is it? It's done? That's it?
What Kale and Pete, what do you guys think of the multiversity issues then?
Yeah, well, to respond to what you just said, like, I also don't know that I got the idealized comics thing out of it as much as it felt like I definitely got the meta commentary on comics as it were, but I also felt like it feels like Grant was tasked with kind of, like Sean pointed out, and I know that this was the intent, right, at least behind some of this stuff, was that like these could be jumping off points for future series, and like everyone is kind of an elevator pitch for these different ideas or whatever. And it feels like Grant kind of mixing that goal with this kind of love letter to comics in general, of this, like, you made the point about how we see Ultra synthesize or Sean made the point, I should say, of all the different eras of comics and stuff like that. And you see that echoed through all of these different kind of the one-shots, but then also the other worlds that Grant teases in the guidebook and everything like that, of this kind of, goal that I feel like I've seen Grant take a shot at before, of like contextualizing it all, right? Like it's all real and it's all not real, and that like it all, rhymes in some kind of way, and like I think the thing about, the two multiversity issues, they kind of remind me of like the proper issues of Civil War, where it's like, yeah, like that's like where the real action happens, but like so much of the story happens in the margins, what are the margins, right? Like it's all the thing. But I feel like those two issues kind of removed from everything else didn't necessarily strike the biggest chord with me. Like I liked the ones that were a little bit more focused. Like even Ultra, like I definitely didn't vibe with it as much as it sounds like the two of you did. But like what I did really appreciate about that issue is how that feels like an issue that only Grant could write. And even when Grant's style isn't for me, I appreciate the mechanics of it, and like just the fact that their voice is so unique in that way. Because like I don't think any other, and maybe not no other writer, but I can't think of another major comics writer that could like give me an issue that talks to me like directly and doesn't feel, kind of cheesy, because it like actively is trying to be like, you're involved in the story, reader, like dear reader. And that feels very old and kind of old fashioned and hokey in a way. But Grant takes that and for lack of a better word, like weaponizes it to enhance the story and give it this sense of tension. And, so as much as like those three issues, I don't think I like as much as some of the more contained things that felt like they had more of a narrative through line, like just within the issue. I think that those three are definitely probably the most technically impressive to me, and things that I feel like a lesser writer just couldn't pull off. I think other writers could write a good one shot about, Captain Marvel, right? But
Sure.
I don't think anybody else could write Ultra comics.
What about you, Cal?
Yeah, I think I feel a bit more similar to Pete, especially with the comparison to like the proper issues of Civil War. Multiversity 2, by the end of it, felt to me like an orgy of superhero figures, doing a crisis book. And that's not bad,
There's some really cool pages you get out of that. That's for damn sure.
It just, it didn't feel, and that is to say, like, it had that layer of Grant spit on top of it. But it just, it, to me, the multiversity issues specifically didn't feel as cohesive as the other parts did, because it felt like the other parts were woven together to get to either side of the multiversity things, but the multiversity issues themselves felt like they were spindly and wild and all over the place.
I don't know if I agree with the first one. I think the first one really sets the table pretty well.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in the first one, we have basically the only Monitor left who, appears to be basically a reader of comic books.
Yeah.
Which you got to love that. He shows up on one of the Earths, and there's a Thor analog there. And he's the last member of the superheroes of their planet. The Monitor basically sacrifices their existence, their independence, effectively, to let that Thor analog travel in his ship, which travels through basically through the bleed, which is between universes, through music, basically, to go out and recruit other characters. So that kind of sets the stage for our first issue, the House of Heroes, which is like a multiverse collection of superheroes where we see characters like Captain Carrot, who I imagine would be a favorite of Kale's, and President Superman. That's Calvin Ellis.
That was his first appearance, right?
No. He appeared in the New 52 Superman Action Comics 3 years earlier, but also Grant book. I believe that Calvin Ellis shows up in whatever that 2015 event was with all the multiverse stuff. I've written with Brainiac. I can't remember the name of that title.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
There was Multiplicity in there. I can't remember what the
one.
Shit. What was that? I would have said multiverse. Convergence. Yeah. So I know he showed. I know he showed up in there, but that's pretty close to this same story, but not done as well.
Yeah. Right. But basically, Calvin Ellis has, and along with all these other characters, are trying to recruit superheroes before all these multiverses die, or before all these universes die, rather. And that's the concept that we kind of see in Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's what the Anti-Monitor is doing in that book back in 1986. But in this book, we get to visit the Earths and take time with them. And I know that was something Grant was trying to accomplish, which is like, I don't want all these universes to die without like actually setting up characters and getting to know them and stuff, instead of them just being like action figures. To Kale's point, maybe that didn't pay off in the end. The first one, what we're introduced to, is a Marvel analog universe. And I personally, reading this, thought, oh, this will make Sean pop, because this kind of feels like when Marvel has the DC analog superheroes in like Hickman's book or whatever.
I can't get enough of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just love things like that. It's beautiful. And that, you're right, that definitely did make me pop. And the big baby one was really funny. I love that. They're just so cool. And I think sometimes that kind of stuff can come off pretty bad. It can come off more like I don't know, when it's not as inspired, it can be dumb.
Yeah.
But again, Grant has a magic touch for things like this, and it just works out really well. Jonathan Hickman does too, when he did it in New Avengers, and he had his DC analog face off with the New Avengers. That was brilliant. So yeah, I love this stuff.
I feel like that kind of comes back to the point I made earlier about like this feeling like a love letter to comics in general from Grant. And like, I think I definitely agree with what Sean just said, where like, I feel like with in a lesser writer's hands, or like maybe in a more cynical story, right? Like that kind of stuff can, I think, easily just feel like fan service and like in a bad way. And like, it doesn't make you pop. It makes you groan or roll your eyes or like, okay, but like, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like with Grant, it just comes across as sincere, and that makes you buy into it.
Yeah, and it's just kind of silly. It's not taking itself seriously. Like the Captain America analog is named American Crusader, and USA are highlighted in American colors in Crusader. That's really silly. Also, like in this world, they talk about these characters having movies in some of their universes and stuff. They talk about the Bug, the Spider-Man analog. Oh, I saw that movie. Like everything feels like it kind of references into itself, so to speak. The Doctor Doom analog has what looks like the Galactus egg, which I think is from Hickman's run, and it bursts the Monitor that we saw earlier, but he's been corrupted into like a he kind of looks like the vampire from Final Crisis.
Yeah.
That sucked on universes, and that kind of takes us into the stories. So the first one we have here, we'll just go right into it, I guess, was the Society of Superheroes. This is kind of like a real Silver Age kind of adventure story with Dr. Fate, the Atom. We had a bunch of World War II characters like the Blackhawks. How do you feel about this one, guys?
I really like this one.
Yeah.
I definitely am a sucker for that that tone. I really like stories about superheroes that are set in like the 30s and 40s, in that kind of like dawn of the superhero age. But I also think that that's hard to do well. We just recently did our our Jupiter's Circle and Legacy review.
Yeah.
That was last month's book club. Go check it out. And that was one of the elements of that book that I responded to. But like I remember being, kind of like feeling like I wanted more of that, and like feeling like it was like kind of what I wanted, but not quite. And I feel like for whatever reason, Grant just taps into that time so well. And maybe it is just because of a genuine affection for that era of comics, where, again, it comes off as authentic to me. So in the same way that I feel like I really responded to the, the Thunderworld Adventures issue, this was another one that I remember, like the first Multiversity, I was kind of like, all right, like what's going on or whatever. And this one kind of felt like it grounded me a little bit and gave me something to connect with a little bit more.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I love Vandal Savage.
Yeah.
He's really cool. And there were some moments in this issue that really struck me, like when Dr. Fate and who was the other guy? The guy with the Dr. Manhattan mask on.
The Atom.
Yeah, that was the Atom.
I think he was called like the Amazing Atom or something in this.
When they are being chased by Parallax and Green Lantern comes, that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was really, really cool.
It's so funny too, because it's just like all we get for Green Lantern is, oh yeah, he died. And then he just shows up and
He's like, no, I didn't.
You were mistaken.
And that's it. Yeah.
And again, it's like, I don't care about Abin Sur at all. I have
Yeah.
no relationship to that character. I don't even know if they've ever been in a comic that I've read up until now. But, you know, Grant is great at setting up moments that make you feel and make you feel about characters that you don't feel for. So yeah, that really struck a chord with me. You know, Parallax, not a character I care about. When Parallax is a dragon chasing around these two people, I'm not thinking about my relationship to the characters so much as I'm invested in the story and just genuinely feeling what is on the page.
Mm-hmm.
And that's excellence. That's creative excellence, especially in big two books where so much of your reading these comics is predicated on your knowledge of them and your care for the characters. To be able to, you know, create an immediate relationship between you and them because the story is so good, that's not easy. And Grant pulls it off all the time.
And
Yeah, this type of story is my bread and butter, I would say. I like these kind of adventure stories,
Sure.
and it's very romanticized. Dr. Fate is a character I always want to really like, but never feel like I'm given the opportunity to care about him. You know, even over the years, there's been like 4 Dr. Fates, you know. But in this environment, he's like really put together. He's the smartest person in the room, and he's like kind of funny too. Like when he's going up against the other magic user, what's his name?
Felix Faust.
Felix Faust. His response to the magic off is to kick him in the balls.
That was awesome.
That was great.
Got that Indiana Jones energy.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
right. When the dude in the desert is swinging a sword and he just shoots him instead. It's also I never really heard of Immortal Man before, but he's like our POV character in this, and I got really into the concept of like, oh, 2 immortal dudes are gonna fight here. That's cool.
Speaking of what Kale just brought up, the Indiana Jones thing, like that happens here, right? When Lady Shiva's like threatening to carve up those women and they just shoot her. Like,
Yeah.
you're talking all this stuff and now you're dead. I love that.
Yeah, I love how she's like, oh, like I'm so fast, I'll slice your legs off before you can even scream, and then they just fucking shoot her.
Oh,
It's great, and like that's like, I think it's not the fault of the work, but it's definitely something that I walked away feeling frustrated about with this. Where I'm like, can I get like 6 of this? Could Grant just write like a 6-issue story about this group? I like these characters together. I'm in, you know? Like, you sold me on a thing that I can't buy.
yeah, I think that's what they wanted. No, someone else write this.
Yeah, I know, but then like who? Like,
Yeah, right.
And that speaks to a core problem that I do have with the totality of this, is that Grant is Grant. And you know, we have seen plenty of writers imitate in a loving way, not in a, you know,
hacky way.
yeah, his style and fail. This is not a condemnation of this writer, but Scott Snyder has done that. You know, death metal is that.
I was going to bring that up.
That has big Grant Morrison energy. Yeah.
It's not even like he's not even shy about it.
No.
He's talked about it. He talked about how Multiversity specifically was an inspiration and how he talked to Grant Morrison about how he would have handled the story that Snyder was working on, and some of the things that Snyder told him. Snyder used some of those ideas. So,
Oh damn! Really?
yeah.
Wow.
So-
No wonder that was so much fun.
I feel like Grant was credited somewhere in Death Metal. I recall seeing that.
I'm pretty confident you're correct. But I think that it's fair to say that whether you like death metal or not, it would have been different in Grant's hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that to say I don't care about these concepts in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I don't care about these concepts outside of the very specific scenario in which Grant Morrison's writing them. So what is the point? What's the value of creating these things if Grant's not going to write them? And you can see that DC doesn't care because they haven't done anything really with any of this.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. They're the gentry.
Yeah.
And I think what's frustrating is I think I generally agree with that statement in terms of like I don't care about these things in a vacuum, but I think like this is an example of a book where like the elevator pitch is appealing to me, but I can see so many ways in which it's a book I would not read. Whereas this, it's both. It's like, yeah, no, like this sounds dope. I would love the idea of Grant writing a like kind of very, you know, golden age, you know, of sci-fi kind of adventurer story, right? Like rather
They
than
always gravitate toward Grant when they write like a classic comic stuff.
yeah, period piece type stuff. I would love to see that. I would love to see them commit to a book like that, even if it was a short run. Like, give me a mini or a maxi about this team from Grant and, you know, literally this same creative team. Like, I would eat that up, you know? But to Sean's point, I don't know that, like, how many other people can pick up those reins and go somewhere with it that's actually cool. Because, like, even, like, there's the we don't get an issue about it, but, like, the cowboy universe where I was like, that sounds fucking dope, but I don't want someone else to write that. I want Grant to write that. Of like the idea of like, oh, they have a telegraph internet, and I was like, please, tell me about the telegraph internet, Grant. That sounds great.
Well, even as far as top tier talent like John's, if I'm not mistaken, his Shazam stuff, it first came out of the New 52.
It was the back issues of Justice League.
Yeah, but then he continued it from how well this did, didn't he?
I don't think so. I think that was it. And we read that for book club at one point.
There's more.
Is there?
Yeah. There's there's that newer Shazam title.
Oh yeah,
that
100%.
John's in.
Yeah. Like last year.
No, it was a couple years ago now.
Yeah.
That was a fun circle.
But it just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah.
Doesn't have the
And
same
that's with a creator who, you know, by all means, like probably loves that character and, you know, probably would genuinely have something good and interesting to say.
I don't know if I would say it fizzled out as much as it's just the fact that Johns is so busy.
Yeah.
You know, like he just doesn't really. It's the same with Grant. Like Grant said they said that they were gonna continue this, right? I remember all the talk about Multiversity 2 and whatever. Where's that?
Yeah, there's supposed to be another one at some point. This book ends on a cliffhanger, which we'll talk about when we get there. But yeah, I mean, this book this was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
The end is what they set up in at the end of something we did recently. Because they set up what is it? Barry Allen goes to be the universe. Oh, was it Death Metal?
Was it?
Where he goes, he's recruited to join this group, this President Superman group.
Really?
Wasn't it
remember that.
Infinite Frontier?
That's what Infinite Frontier. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a thing on it on the Wikipedia page where Grant said in 2017 that Multiversity 2 was on hold. So.
Yeah, I mean, this Harbinger character at the end talking about Multiverse 2, these are all things I feel like are Grant cliffhangers for future Grant stuff. But I mean, if other people are picking it up, that's the thing is Grant is a special talent. You know, Grant's been writing for 40 years at this point. Grant is like 63 years old. Like they keep trying to kind of back away from the DC universe, and obviously they keep getting sucked back in, whether it's the Green Lantern season 1 and season 2 stuff or Multiversity or what have you. Wonder Woman Earth 1, you would want other people to write these kind of things. I feel like that's the idea, is the legacy of a writer passing the baton to another writer. But yeah, there's only one Grant Morrison.
And that's the problem, though, right? Is I think that's fine when you're talking about something that doesn't have the Grant. We've called it the sweat, the spit, the special sauce, whatever the fuck. But Grant has that X factor that they can bring to a book, and when it hits, it fucking hits. And there are certain ideas that they establish that like I said, I just don't think somebody else can do, because it's a Grant idea, and it's not, oh yeah, here, I invented Spider-Man, run with that, right? It's like, it's a weird cowboy universe, like, who's gonna fucking do that book? And do it justice. Well, fucking step up to the plate, Kale, let's go.
Can't I have anxiety?
Let's focus back on let's focus back on Multiversity, because the next up in our issues here, our one shots, is the Earth Me universe.
God, I hated this.
Did you?
Hated it so much.
With all the children of the first generation of Justice League characters, we had Ben Oliver on art here. Everyone's bored because there's nothing to do. Superman created, in this world, he created an army of super robots that protect the Earth. Superman basically created an infrastructure that created a utopia. It's just that everyone's bored. What do you guys think?
I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
First of all, we read this in a post-Jupiter's Legacy world.
Right,
and there were a lot of things about this that echoed that for me. But also, I read this as, what do all the characters created in the last 15 years do with themselves when Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, and Wolverine are still the characters that everybody wants to read about?
Yep.
When a Kamala Khan book or a Miles Morales book are struggling to make sales because people still want to read Peter Parker and Captain Marvel, what do those characters do with themselves? That's how I read this, because obviously Grant Morrison does things in a meta context. And I just feel like this was perfect. These characters are bored. They don't have anything to do. They sit around and, party. And some of the characters who are a little bit older will go into like basically a danger room and, replay their hits in a sense. All that really struck a chord with me. And, even the fact that Damian Wayne was Batman, and getting to see him, older, but he's still Damian, and he wants to be Batman, but the world is what it is, and he's just trying to have a time while he's in it. I found a lot to like in this story. I don't know. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, there's like there's something you see on the internet sometimes of like millennials talking about being a gifted kid and then kind of being a burnout. It's like what this issue is. It's like a bunch of burnouts. They're all concerned about what parties they're invited to or not invited to. They compliment each other's appearances because like it's just work to stay in shape. And like everyone's sad. The issue starts off with someone killing themselves.
And everyone reads comics.
So it feels relatable.
People who read comics are sad.
All my friends are depressed and reading comics. Yeah, this one I think was probably the issue that I dug the least, but not because it wasn't good. I think the thing that I did really dig about it was I was far enough in the series. Now, I mean, I guess I realized this in the first issue, that the thing was just a treasure trove of like Easter eggs and nods and stuff. So it was very much interesting to me to like Google the characters and be like, who of these are real? And like, like what's their deal? And like, I dug that, you know, like this was like based on like the original Super Sons, you know, not like the rebooted one that we've gotten the last couple of years, right? Or like there's like Plastic Man's kid who I didn't know existed, you know, and like just
they're
random
all real, right? All these characters.
I think almost all of them, yeah. So yeah, I thought that element of it was cool, and it's like it's a fine issue. It didn't blow me away, but I thought it was also like good in terms of like the pacing of like where it lands in the, you know, the rest of the arc. It felt like it gave us a little bit of breathing room after a couple of, you know, the opening couple issues are pretty dense. So
is this the issue, Kale, where you expressed your frustration of Grant trying to write pop culture?
Yeah, Grant has this pop culture voice that just grates me, like put me on a cheese grater. You know, the spiky part that nobody knows what it's for, scrape that across my butt cheeks, because that's what this is to me. It feels explosively dated when he uses it for me, when they use it for me. And I think it reminds me so much of the early Invisibles. I've only read a few volumes of that, but so much of it feels like this, of the Invisibles specifically, feels like this poppy, this Brit pop sort of dated dialogue that only exists in a certain bubble. And all of Grant's voice when he tries to do that feels like this.
Doesn't it remind you, Kale, of Mark Miller in Jupiter's Legacy? I feel like he does a similar thing with the young people in that book as well.
I could see that, yeah. Especially when you're first introduced to them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was going to say. I think both Grant and Mark, who used to be like very tight in the 90s, were going to a lot of the same social scenes in England and stuff. And that's how I kind of picture the voices in these. Like it's a very like art hipster scene kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And there's like an art show and everything. And
yeah
totally has that like, you know, like
a lot of pretense.
Yeah. But I don't know.
Pretentious. It's like a pretentious hipster edge.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with that, but I don't mind it either, though. You know, I kind of feel like that's the point, but I could see how that would like grate on you too.
Yeah.
I really like the art in this portion too. It feels like that kind of hyper realized style that I feel like lends itself here, because I feel like the intent is to really try to ground these former sidekicks and offspring of the heroes.
Yeah, this is not necessarily my favorite visual. This isn't definitely not my favorite visually speaking. It's all right, and I definitely see where you're coming from with what you said. In that it you know, they're very much grounded. They're not, you know, as cool or flashy, or inspiring of hope. Like the in no way is this to be disrespectful towards the artist, but it's kind of like flat.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that that's deliberate because they are flat.
Yeah.
And so that's cool. I like the idea that the art is it exists to accentuate what the story is doing. But because of that, it's just not my favorite. I don't care for the way it looks too much.
Yeah, I don't love this style in general. Like the hyper realistic, like art thing often doesn't work for me. I feel like it gives me like almost like an uncanny valley kind of vibe, where it's like almost like you're like tracing over pictures, and I don't mean that, and that sounds offensive. I don't mean that way. Like it looks so real that it gives me like a disconnect a little bit. I feel like sometimes.
See, I think it doesn't quite get there. I think if this was done by someone like Greg Land, the art would probably sell it a lot harder because he's very, very photorealistic. Legend is he copies what is it, the looks of porn stars.
Oh.
So like his stuff is very photorealistic. But this to me doesn't quite get there.
Huh.
And I think it, if it were, more realistic, it would add that extra layer of, like you say, how fake these people all are. But it just doesn't, for me, it just doesn't quite get there.
Fair enough. And that takes us into, I guess, the divisive Pax Americana. This is Frank Whiteley back with Grant Morrison here. This sees all the Charlton comic book characters that were bought by DC Comics in, I believe, the early 60s. So your Captain Atom, your Blue Beetle, your Peacemaker, your Question, all those characters are seen here.
Nightshade.
Nightshade. And it's like there's a lot of Watchmen inspired stuff here too, clearly. A big thing that is played here is when you first open this part of the story, it plays with your brain because it's all backwards. And so you read it, and once you get to the end, you see that the domino mask of the little boy is the president here. It looks like an infinity sign. And everything Captain Atom says before he's sucked into a man-made black hole basically talks about how you can jump anywhere in a story in life. Like that's how he perceives time or whatever. That's what happens here. This is kind of meant to be read both forwards and backwards to kind of really get the full sense of the narrative.
I really wish that I had read it twice.
Yeah,
because it did kind of become clear that was the case as I got to the end. This issue has one of, and again, I only read this just now, but this issue has one of my favorite pages ever. Like I couldn't believe what I was looking at, and it's the page where I don't even remember their names, quite frankly. Was it Nightshade, and who's the old man? Whoever that is.
Oh,
the president,
dad, or something.
Yeah.
The vice president or whatever. I think that's
where they're walking down the stairs.
Yeah.
Oh,
that was crazy. That was crazy, and the way that the dialogue mirrors what they're doing. How the president's like, everything goes into reverse as you now have to read the panel or the page in the reverse. And it's leading you on to the idea, if you keep reading these pages, because there's a lot of pages that have allusions to this, that you should read this backwards. And as a test, I actually read a couple of the pages backwards and the dialogue works.
Yeah.
That is like,
fuck me.
I'm doing that right now, and it's insane.
Yeah,
that's so mind blowing, and you can't oversell how hard that would be to do, to write dialogue that works if you read it backwards and forward. That's nuts. That's outrageous.
Yeah, well, so much of what the Question is doing is trying to solve this oldest mystery in this universe, and who killed the original superhero. And at the end, you find out, the president of the United States, who dies at the very beginning of the issue, is the one who killed his own father, setting the entire story in motion. And that's the last page of the story. Just crazy. I know some people have their opinions on Quietly vary, but the paneling in this issue is so creative from the stairway that Sean described, where you're reading in a zigzag, to pages where there's 16 panels, which is normally you would think of kind of being really superfluous, but it's with a design, because those panels on those pages are utilized to like solve a mystery, to figure out who killed this woman, Nora O'Rourke, who is like sleeping with the Peacemaker. It's great.
So I completely missed that part.
So I'm generally one to not care for Frank Quietly's art. I've definitely been the odd man out on that before. But I don't know what it is about this. The line work on this issue feels a lot different. Like there are still like it's definitely still his style, but I think that the things that generally turn me off about his style the most feel toned down here. And I don't know if it's like maybe, the colorist that he was partnered with on this one or what have you, but it's Rob Lay on colors. But I don't know. I actually really liked the art in this issue, and like knowing my bias against Quietly, like when I got into this, knowing like, getting to the front page and it's like, oh, the band's reunited and this is not the band that I like. But it really worked for me actually.
One other note, I talked about how the last panel is the domino mask looking like an infinity sign. Well, the very first panel is also a peace flag
that looks like a domino mask.
That looks like an infinity sign. So again, just linking the fact that this story was read both front and backwards. Something else I wanted to talk about with regard to this issue. So in our last issue, the Me universe, and the previous one before that, the Gentry infest the universe with the comic book. In this one, a device we'll see multiple times in Multiversity is characters talking to the reader. And that's something we see with Captain Atom when he's sitting in front of the collider. He's reading the comic completely out of order because how he perceives time. And he talks about it and he says, I'm thinking how our universe appears from a higher dimensional perspective. Flat. Complete, yet always beginning and ending. Always different. He's flipping through the comic. The story is linear, but I can flip through the pages in any order, any direction, forward in time to the conclusion, back to the opening scene, telling the reader to read this issue forwards and backwards. The characters remain unaware of my scrutiny, but their thoughts are transparent, weightless, and little clouds. This is how a two-dimensional continuum looks to you. Then he looks to the reader. Imagine how your 3D world appears to me. Your back pages and your future continuities. I know your origins, the secret identities that you hide from even your loved ones. Then he disappears. Just love that shit.
Yeah, man. You know what? See, I remember how I said earlier that, my opinions about this series would change. Well, they changed because this issue now has become one of my favorites.
This is the best one now.
Yeah, Grant put work in. Oh, and again, compliments to Frank. This page where Captain Atom is walking up a bridge with the president, you see that the bridge they're walking on is mirrored on top of the water. Again, just everything is like a mirror.
In the back matter for this for the giant ass trade, if you have it, the Grant's notes are in it, and he notes how they note how they want to do the circular nature of that page. There's a dragonfly that goes across the bottom or something, and then at the end it gets eaten by the bird that's going the opposite direction.
Oh man. And to bring my point home, Earth 4, I believe this is the only one so far that hasn't been infested by the Gentry. Captain Atom disappears with the comic. You don't see their world coming to an end. Makes you wonder what could be done. Grant's
we never go back to this Earth, right?
It's mentioned in Final Crisis. You see this version of Captain Atom, which is like a Dr. Manhattan allegory, and obviously Dr. Manhattan is an allegory of the Charlton Captain Atom. So but otherwise, I don't think so. I don't think we come back to it anytime.
God, that is the most meta shit ever.
Yeah,
that Grant was like, what if I wrote a Watchmen-esque story with the Charlton characters? It's like,
yeah.
sure.
Grant talked about this and described it. If Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons had pitched The Watchmen now, rooted in a contemporary political landscape, that was the pitch for Pax Americana.
Love it.
Because instead of rather focusing on the Cold War, you see President Bush and you see like terrorists and stuff. So,
beautiful son of a bitch.
Yeah, people always talk about how Grant has beef with Alan Moore. They always talk about how much they love Alan Moore's comics. So,
I don't think Grant has beef with anything in the universe.
Just evil scorpion gods that haunted him in real life. So we talked about Thunderworld Adventures, and that takes us now to the Multiversity guidebook, where we get the Batman of two worlds. We get kind of a Judge Dredd-esque Batman who shoots first and asks questions later, and then kind of like a chibi style Batman. In addition to that, we're also taken to like a Jack Kirby Fourth World setting where we see Kamandi. I know that's kind of your shit, Kale. What do you guys think of the guidebook issue? This kind of gives us a lot of exposition on kind of the multiverse in DC, for those of you who aren't really familiar with DC's history of the multiverse, which goes back to the Flash of Two Worlds, and then Crisis on Infinite Earths, Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis, Flashpoint, etc.
I really had fun with this issue, and it is almost not an issue of a comic, it technically is, but the middle of it is literally just, it's like
skating on thin ice, Grant.
Like I've got a book upstairs that's like the official guidebook of the Marvel Universe, and it's like exactly like this format, but just for things that don't actually exist, which maybe is even its own meta thing that Grant was nodding at those books, who's to say? Yeah. But funnily enough, this is one of the ones that I enjoyed the most because, like I said, I think I like the idea of Multiversity as a project more than the actual execution of it. So some of just like the idea of just like Grant Morrison like sitting in a room and just rattling off ideas for universes and then being like, here's 2 paragraphs, and hands it to a writer and is just, or I'm sorry, an artist, and is like, here, like draw a mock-up of this, is fucking hilarious to me.
I don't know how many of these are original Grant universes. I think a couple of them are, obviously. A lot of these already exist, though.
I mean, yeah, but a bunch of them are new ones.
Sure. Including one where it's clearly Grant as a stand-in mad scientist leader of a bunch of robot superheroes.
And then there's like, obviously a ton of them are nods to other universes. Sorry,
Pete. That's not a Grant stand-in. That's the guy that created the Metal Men.
Oh.
Tomorrow? No. Who frick?
Well, here, while you figure that out, I made a list of the non-DC homages. So Earth 41 is an analog for Image. That's where Dino Cop came from. He's Savage Dragon, obviously.
Of course.
There's the Nimrod Squad, which is based on Youngblood.
Sure.
And like a bunch of them are like fusions of like a Youngblood character and a DC character. Earth 34 is the Astro City one. Earth 35 is Rob Liefeld's Awesome Comics. Earth 8 and 7 are both Marvel. Earth 36 is Big Bang Comics, which is like an Image series that's all like Golden Silver Age, like retro style comics that are like based on DC comics from that era, which I had never heard of. 39 is the Thunder Agents, created by Wally Wood. 48 is based on the Earth 48 and pre-crisis Earth 6. And it's also got like nods to Top 10 by Alan Moore, and just like it's like a bunch of random stuff rolled into it, to a bunch of these. So like for me, this was the issue I took the most time with, because literally every single Earth I was like on the DC wiki, like, what's this one based on? What's this one based on? And then I would like go read the Wikipedia page a little bit, and just like it as like Grant Morrison, kind of educating me about a bunch of obscure stuff was very fun.
Yeah, look at Earth 6, Pete. That's the one that Stan Lee presents the DC universe, where he reimagines the DC characters in.
That's that. Okay, cool. I didn't get that one on my list. I got to write that down.
It's funny that of all these universes, the Earth 0 is the most boring one. It's the New 52.
It is Earth.
Yeah, and there's a lot of blank ones here, and that was by design, just so like other people can create this stuff.
Yeah, and they didn't.
But only 7.
Yeah, only 7. Also, the thing that really pops here for me is the map.
Yeah.
I'm a real sucker for this stuff.
Tremendous.
I usually am, but this is too much. There's too much shit on it. This is like you jump the shark even for a dork like me. Like
well, I'd be curious to know if this is what Dan Didio was working on.
Maybe. I know Dan Didio is a sucker for this stuff too.
Yeah.
And this map is a lot of the stuff Sean I know is into. I know a premise Grant wanted to put in Final Crisis. I think Jeff Johns found a way to put it in Green Lantern. Maybe is that the source wall, which is very ingrained in New Gods and Fourth World comics, is basically just the fourth wall. Again, this idea of comics blending in with the real world, this hyper crisis idea. Sean, did you have any thoughts on all the 52 Earths that we were introduced to in this glossary section?
I think that's really cool, man. I love creation unfiltered, just the idea of wild creativity. And Grant is, again, we've talked about it. They are one of the best at that. And that's something that they do better than almost any other comics creator. All these worlds and ideas, and like, what the hell is it? I don't know, but I'm into it. Like, I don't know if these were his creation or their creations. I don't know if these are things that existed that they just kind of built upon. Don't know, don't care. It's awesome, and I love that it's here. It's perfect that this is here. It's kind of a bummer in a way, because for the most part, you can't read stories about the characters from these other Earths.
Yeah.
Some of them are in this story. I think a lot of them are.
Yeah.
But that's just the one story. And there were some that I was like, man, I really want to like see what I want to see what this is about. Like,
is there one that stands out to you?
Yeah, I really like the Earth 23. Looked really cool. I mean, obviously. And there were a few others. I'm looking through them now, but yeah, I really love this type of stuff. And if they could have done like one page or a few pages of each of these different, worlds. And now I wonder, like, what about the 7 that aren't fleshed out? What's that about? Why is that the case? How do we get that? It drives me nuts, but in a good way.
Earth 13 really pops out to me. That's the one where the demon Etrigan rocketed Earth from the Doom planet Camelot. Fights evil in Merlin's name as Super Demon.
Love it.
I would read that in a heart.
Wait, real quick. Sean, you brought up Earth 23. That's the one where Calvin Ellis is from.
Calvin Ellis, yeah.
What is Batman's name? because they list all the characters and they don't list a Batman name, but he's in the lineup, and I thought that was funny.
I don't know.
Guess we don't know.
I tried to look him up, and like, there's no information about him. I'm like, so the only defining factor about this is that he is the white friend in this group. That's it.
I guess so.
Isn't he black in the first issue?
Was he?
I'm looking.
He's not in the Multiversity guide. But the other one I wanted to ask you about, Sean, was how do you feel about Earth 31, Grant's pirate universe? Would you read it though if it existed? Because Grant wrote it.
Nope.
You're out.
That's the one I'd have to pass on. In fact, one of my least favorite Grant Morrison creations happens to be the issue of what's the story where Batman's going through time?
I'll
look it up. But where he's Blackbeard, right?
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne.
Didn't like it. The Return of Bruce Wayne.
The Return of Bruce Wayne.
I was not happy. Not happy at all. Couldn't wait to get past that.
Just the pirate issue or the whole thing?
Just the pirate issue. The rest of it was
Yeah. Awesome.
Batman could be a cowboy though.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I hang out with Jonah Hex.
I also really like how there's Earth 32 where it's just like, yeah, everybody's just amalgam characters in this one. That's it. That's the gimmick.
Yeah.
I mentioned how this issue kind of introduces more of the universes. It really establishes what the multiverse is and what's the state of it. And this is really the only other issue other than the last two and Ultra Comics where we kind of get to feel the Gentry doing stuff as the superheroes of the multiverse. It moves the greater plot forward, but really what this issue is about is our giant guidebook, so to speak.
I had just one more comment about this issue that I really wanted to make.
Sure.
And I typically despise things like this, I have to be honest, but
okay.
The little Batman, oh my God, that was so cute.
He is really cute where he pulls off his little thing.
Oh my God. I couldn't even stand it. And then when he's like, I don't know what I am. I might be a robot. I don't know if that's in this issue, but it happens at some point. Yeah. I was like, oh no. Oh.
I was like, you poor little bastard.
Yeah. And I was like, please don't kill him. Please, Batman, don't kill Batman. Don't kill little Batman.
But then the author revives those characters anyway at the end.
The one panel of where they're arguing and he's just holding up the little comic book in front of his face and it's literally like as big as his entire body. It's really funny.
All right.
He's like, I think I'm a machine. I don't understand. I don't know what I am. Where am I? And he's looking at his little arm with the machine parts underneath. Oh, please.
So good.
Can't even handle it.
He's too cute. So that takes us to the Masterman issue, which I remember being controversial back when it came out for obvious reasons. Jim Lee lends his talents here along with Scott Williams.
Yeah.
We're focusing on the story of Kal-El landing in Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia and fulfilling the Nazi wet dream of the Ubermensch. What do you guys think of this issue?
This was controversial at the time?
Yeah.
It was.
Why?
Because Superman's a Nazi?
Yeah, well, the controversy is how easy it is for to kind of blend these DC characters and concepts in with like fascism, where like Hitler's inspired by a comic book that's like an American comic book, and
he's not inspired by that.
Oh, sure. He looks at the comic book and slams it on the table at the American Crusader. He's reading a comic where 30s Superman is punching him in the face while he's taking a shit at the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say that. I mean, I guess you could argue that, but he also literally says right beforehand, there's a whole page where he's like, wait, do you not realize what this is? The Superman, the Overman, the great man of history has been like, that's not from comics. Like, that's Nazi philosophy. Like, yeah, like the idea of Superman sliding into Nazi Germany, of course that makes sense.
But this is very clearly already like in the throes of his reign. Like, they're literally saying Hail Hitler. There's iconography everywhere. How could anybody get that out of this? That he was inspired by Superman to do all these things. It's just not the case.
Yeah. I'm just parroting what people said 6 years ago.
I don't know, and just like the idea of this like being offensive to anybody when literally the first like 3 fucking pages are just Hitler taking a fucking massive shit and how awful his like constipation is. Like, they're clearly just making fun of him to be like, hey, just so we're clear, like
there are just some people in the world who are so sensitive. They see Nazi and it's over. They see X and it's over. It's like, look, man, you know, those things happen. They're real. It is what it is. You got to get over it. Like, Superman is a character that doesn't exist in the real world. So, you know, it is what it is. He can be this. He isn't this traditionally.
Sure.
And it would be nuts if he was. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a relatively small side story that explores that concept, just like we explore every other concept, you know?
Yeah, I really like this issue. I love a good Elseworld story, like love alternate reality junk. This is fun for the same reason that Red Sun is.
Yeah, this issue's like really compelling because Superman is terrible. You know, Superman commits atrocities. And obviously the story is that, you know, he's a product of his upbringing and where he was raised and who he was raised by. But by the end, when he feels remorse for all the things he did, you know, he toppled his house of cards, you know, you kind of feel bad for him, but like at the same time, you know, he did all the things he did.
Yeah, he's a tragic figure.
And also what I love about this, and of course, you know, Red Sun is about a similar thing, but you know, the idea that you are the sum total of your life experiences. And so, you know, as good a human as Superman is in the Earth that we read in comics every month, well, what if he was born elsewhere? What if his parents weren't good people and they didn't teach him the right way to live? Like, he would be different, just like you would be if you were born in a different time or a different place or a block away from where you were born. You know, like, everything is relative in that regard. And this is just a reminder of that. And I think that in the grander story of Multiversity and looking at DC, that's important to note, because there are all these different worlds and universes in which these characters are different because it's a different world. And the idea that our greatest hero in our universe out there in the multiverse, there's a version of him where he's bad, I think that's worth telling.
Not just bad, like this is like the worst possible version of that character.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably, right? He at least feels bad.
Yeah. Like Nazi Batman, who's a total prick.
Yeah, I mean, he's down. Like, he's down as fuck, you know? Like, I mean, like, shit, they have the moment where they show him coming back from the war, and they're like, well, he's like, what did you do while I was away? You know, they're definitely trying to give this implication that, you know, he wasn't necessarily complicit in everything. Injustice Superman might be worse than Nazi Superman. Who's to say?
This issue was very successful at making me patriotic because I was like, fuck yeah, Uncle Sam, go fucking kill some Nazis.
Right?
Oh yeah. I always hate it when Uncle Sam appears in a comic book, but this time I was like, let's get it.
Uncle Sam is probably one of the only personifications of America that I'm fucking down with.
Yeah,
rules.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, when he's used right, I totally vibe.
What do you think of this issue, Kale?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's a really, really strong issue. And I like that it made me feel for Nazi Superman.
That's hard to do, you know.
Yeah.
We also just acknowledge like Jim Lee.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No.
Yeah. The work in this issue is fucking great.
He's a master. He, so seldom works, but man, when he comes out to play, it's like, look at this.
Jim Lee is like a god of comics.
Mhm.
And I don't think that he gets enough credit because he's vanished from doing interiors for the most part.
Yeah.
But when he comes down and he does the work, it's amazing. And it reminds you why X-Men, giant size X-Men is, it's still the best-selling comic book.
Yeah.
That's why, because of Jim Lee. And we don't have Jim Lee's.
His inks. His fucking inks, man.
Yeah, we need to give Jim Lee his flowers. We really do. Like, as a community, he really deserves it. And that is an amazing artist right there.
Tell you what, Sean, if we ever meet him in real life, I'm gonna just throw roses at him.
I actually met him one time. It was pretty cool.
Oh yeah?
Nice.
Yes. Cool. I remember. I'll just a quick story. When
Sure.
DC Universe Online came out, that video game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
At Comic-Con, they had a party for it. And I don't even know how I got there. I don't know how I was able to get in, but I did. And it wasn't much to it. They gave us like a free poster. We got to see exclusive behind the scenes stuff from the game. And Jim Lee was there just chatting it up with people. So I got to say hello.
That's awesome.
That is fucking rad. There are 4 inkers on this book.
Oh damn, really?
It's,
well,
it's
fucking
not, it's not Jim Lee.
Holy shit. Like there's some good inks on this book.
It makes sense. This you could tell this was a book that DC put a lot of pride into.
Mm-hmm.
Grant Morrison and Jim Lee,
I feel, Sean, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he usually works with Scott Williams and Alex Sinclair.
Exactly. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Beautiful looking book, and just like the closing moments where the narrator is basically like, Superman knew where he was going to land and didn't stop it because he had to grieve. And the last line I want to really highlight here is, as Superman's crashing into Metropolis, Uncle Sam says, "Heads up, ratsies." Sam says, "You can ram your Siegfried where the sun don't shine. We want you to pay for your crimes."
Fucking love it.
Let's go, Uncle Sam.
Ratsies. Something I never thought I'd hear, words that I would hear come out of Phil's mouth. Let's go, Uncle Sam.
Yeah, well, I'm editing this episode, so I'm not going to isolate it.
Phil, did you read Uncle Sam's final words there in the voice of Steve Austin, by the way?
No, but I like it. I like it a lot.
That's great.
So how would Steve Austin say this last line here?
Okay, all right. Heads up, you son of a bitch, ratsies. Stone Cold Sam says you can ram your goddamn Siegfried where the sun don't shine. And that's the bottom line, because Uncle Sam said so.
There you go.
Can we get Stone Cold to play Uncle Sam?
Yes.
Rule.
Yeah, that would be sick. That takes us to Ultra Comics. We talked about it a bit. I kind of want to circle back here a little bit because when what's his name, Ultra, the character, tells you not to turn the page, and you're immediately greeted by some boardroom guy who basically is like, "Oh, I'm going to create the best superhero in a lab in a world where superheroes don't exist." And the way he talks about it, he's like an advertising guy from like Mad Men or something. "Ah, there you are. Guess that's one way to get your attention, right? But don't worry about Ultra. He's only dreaming in his tank." And they basically talk about how they're going to curate creating this ultimate superhero. Doug, I want to say Doug Manka is how you say his name. He's been around for years. He helped create Bane.
This is the best Doug Monk I've ever seen.
Yeah. Here's my fun fact. I worked with his wife for 2 years.
What?
Why the fuck am I the only one who doesn't have a fun fact about somebody who worked on this book?
Yeah, we worked at a department store. She worked in the copy center. Say no more. I thought that Ultra looked deliberately like Miracle Man.
Oh, interesting.
You know who?
Yeah, that was my thought. I figured that was what the point was.
Yeah, and that was like the British
I can
version
see
of
that, yeah.
Captain Marvel, I think. They kind of spiraled into their own thing. Like in the beginning, I think Captain Marvel was called Miracle Man as like a bad translation or something, and it just spiraled into their own character.
Fuck,
in
he
UK
really
Marvel
does look like
Comics.
Miracle Man.
Or
Yeah.
that's not UK Marvel, but you get my point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad paraphrasing of the history, but I think you're
Close.
pretty spot on. Yeah.
I don't actually think I have anything else to add on this.
I'll tell you what.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it. The way he dies with the text at the very end, this black and purple text, final crisis, world crisis, cosmic crisis, start of oxygen. One by one, the constellations go out. One by each goodbye. More heartbreaking than sad stars blinking out. This is like a new character that dies basically because creative doesn't really get behind it.
I love that, and I love the like kind of synergy and the symbiotic relationship between Ultra and the essentially the fans, right?
Yeah.
Like they're able to bring him back by reading about him, and then this character who's like this corporate character or whatever, bites out this thing in his what is
His
this
forehead.
called? Yeah,
Gem in his forehead.
the gem in his forehead, and he it's almost like he's meant to die in that moment, but he takes control of the narrative by deciding what the Ultra stuff is.
Yeah.
In that moment, like that's so cool. The character takes over the story and goes a different way, and ultimately loses out to the editors in the end. But for that moment, he was able to control the narrative.
It's like he's like the author.
Right, of his own story. It's like if an author really loves his character,
Yeah,
and wants the character to persist. Oh God, come on! How is that not the coolest shit in comics?
This is the essence of comic books.
Yep.
Anything else to add, guys, before we move on to Multiversity 2?
Nope.
Okay, yeah. So we touched on it a bit before, but this is kind of where our loosely threaded plot all culminates into the final confrontation with the Gentry. We see all these different iterations of superheroes that we saw in the guidebook, including my boy Super Etrigan at the very start of it here, on a giant splash page. In the House of Heroes, come together and have to fight the corrupted Monitor and then all the Gentry. There's a lot going on. This issue specifically drew comparisons in my mind to Dark Knight's Metals because there's a lot going on. But unlike that, I really dug I liked what was happening there too, but I felt more invested, I guess, in what was happening here. Because even though, we didn't have like long runs establishing these characters, I was given enough that I picked up what they were putting, what Grant was putting down.
Yeah. I think that, again, this story is less for me about the specific characters and my knowledge of them than what actually happens and the moments that Grant is able to create by just sucking you into the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I found myself connected to this issue, even though it's just a bunch of crazy. I mean, there's literally a Superman who is a rabbit.
Captain Carrot, he gets his head cut off.
Gets his head cut off, and that's not enough. That's not enough to stop my man.
He's still fighting.
Yo, I love Captain Carrot.
How could you not?
When we first got there, I was like, okay, this must be a Grant thing, right? Nope, sure wasn't. That's a real thing.
Yep. Both Marvel and DC have like animal superhero universes. Like Rocket Raccoon and Marvel comes from like a bunch of animal superheroes.
Yeah, but
Well,
fucking
no, it would be more akin to Peter Porker, Spider-Ham.
Oh, sure.
yeah, but like the thing that I thought was crazy when I looked them up, because again I wanted to see what the deal was. They like appeared originally in like Teen Titans, and then were like in the main universe. Like they weren't.
Oh, damn.
They didn't get like cordoned off to their own universe until later.
Do you know about when that happened? Is it like the very, very first iteration of the Teen Titans?
It says they first appeared in a 16-page special insert in the New Teen Titans number 16.
The New Teen Titans.
82.
That would have been the 70s.
It was 82.
Okay.
Oh, fucking hell.
Well, it's issue 16, right? So
It's like the very end of the Bronze Age, I guess.
yeah.
Compliments to Ivan Reese on art here. There's again, I really appreciate like interesting motifs for the corrupted Monitor to kind of usher in the Gentry. They have to solve a Rubik's Cube in 15 steps, and paneling is used to reflect that. There's so many grid panels that are used as like a device through the Rubik's Cube that I thought was really neat and creative.
I also like how the turns are used to like create tension, you know? Like
Yeah.
what I forget his name. Utan.
Nix Uotan.
Nix Uotan. He's like, oh, in like, 15 turns, I'm going to end the world or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he's like, turn 14, turn 13. Like, it gives, it really heightens the drama. It gives it that, like, the clock's ticking, motherfuckers, and
Like a turn-based video game or something.
I kind of hoped that was like connected to the page turns.
That would have been, if they did less pages, maybe.
That would have been sick. It kept time though, in a way. Like,
Yeah.
it creates space in between, just like the 12 panel grid does. I really love how this thing just transformed into a Crazy Crisis story.
Yeah, right at the end.
And what would a crisis be without the Flash just running for his life?
Mhm.
Like, I just love like, these panels of him like SOS, SOS, and there's even we get a Flash fact or two.
Yeah.
Oh, love that. Straight out of like 50s Flash comics.
Yeah, that's just brilliant stuff.
And I love how when they come back together, it's just, there's like that shot of just all of them just coming in and just punching him in the face. It's so great.
I mean, they're going like this, speed of light, and a split second lasts forever when you're the Flash. So, they're they're knocking him on his ass.
Also, I really love the part because they had like established earlier that this specific Flash was like a dork and like read comics and shit. And I love how when they're like, "Oh, you got to read the comics," and he's like, "Geez, I'm not that much of a nerd. Like, it's the middle of a fight. Like, what are you talking about?" It's good stuff.
One Flash is like, they already destroyed a whole universe, and you're reading too fast.
And that's so cool because in that moment, I was like, "Oh, I'm reading too fast. Oh shit, I gotta go back because I missed something here."
It's like, slow down.
Well, it's the action scenes. You're kind of akin to read quickly during the action scenes because you want to keep up with the pace of the fight and stuff.
Right.
Other just neat little stuff like the Captain America of one world looks at the other Captain America of the other world is like, "Oh, that's me," basically. And then they, again, a celebration of comic books. In this world, they're called retaliators. So the Captain America, to rally his group of Avengers, says, "Beats me, but I know where we're heading. Retaliators rampage."
Love that.
I'm in.
Also, I love the him fighting the undead version of himself. I'm like, that's a Marvel Zombies nod.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, there's just, it's like everything. There's just so many fucking layers of references and nods and just random stuff. It's crazy. Also, I know we already talked about how great Captain Carrot is, but the part where he gets his head cut off, I was like very angry for a second. I was like, are you really about to just murk my man like this? And then, literally the next panel, he's like, whoop! And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Cartoon physics, Pete.
Yeah, it's one of the best superpowers in the world, frankly. He's like invincible.
This final boss.
Yeah, that's about what I was going to ask about.
Yeah,
Harbinger.
Clearly, he inspired the villain Perpetua that Scott Snyder created.
Oh yeah,
and I think the implication from what Snyder did is that they're of the same ilk.
You think?
Because he references the empty hand, or he says empty is my hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in Death Metal and in the Infinite Frontier, they talk about the hand, and I guess the idea is like the hand that controls everything. Yeah. I think that these are interrelated characters.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what do you guys make of the Harbinger, because his motive basically is to create the final chapter of your never-ending story. You know, comics we talk about all the time in the main show, how stories kind of drift out and expand, but eventually they all rubber band back to a baseline continuity, and the stories never end. Captain America's been fighting the good fight, in the modern era of whatever iteration it is, for 50 years. Ditto for Superman, Batman, all these characters. But it's like this, my kind of perception is that this is just someone who hates comic books.
Yeah.
I think it's AT&T. Actually, that was a joke, but now I kind of I'm looking at the page where he's sitting on his throne or whatever, and the electricity coming off his horns and then to the antennas. There might be something there. There might be something.
It's 5G.
There. 5G.
5G.
Yeah, I don't know. Now that you say that, I think that makes sense. I remember when I was reading it, I was kind of I was wondering if maybe it was commentary on, like, because Uotan is like the reader, right? And he's like the good reader. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, I was like, is this supposed to represent like the bad reader or something like that? But I definitely don't. Now that you say that, I think that makes more sense. Because it's like this idea of, right, like it says, there's something about how, like, it what was the line that made me think that? Whatever. I don't remember. But
you gave up on the play pretty quick.
It's a weak theory, all right?
Enough.
Yeah, he leaves. They thwart the Gentry, and all the characters across the multiverse are gathered together. They thank Nick Uotan for basically saving all their lives. His actions are what basically it's the reader is why these books are printed. Exactly. They're the ones that buy them. So all the characters are thanking the reader, the loyal reader who spends all the money, as evidenced by the very last panel. Here's your $800, DC Comics, for all the shit you provided me over the years. And
hope he got more than that.
And we're basically implied to have like a Justice League of the multiverse. I think they show up in other stuff. Kale kind of alluded to that. The Operation Justice Incarnate, led by Calvin Ellis. That's Multiversity. What do you guys think of the ending?
Could not believe that they didn't have Captain Carrot as the leader of the new team. Ridiculous, frankly. But
well, the Hulk baby's there. Don't worry.
Like I said earlier on, I really wish that there had been a resolution. It feels like things just wrap up really quick, and it doesn't feel that satisfying. I was taken aback by the fact that it was over. I was like, wait, what the, it just ends. So that didn't feel so great. I like the ending itself, but I thought that there could have been, at least a few more pages in there.
Well, especially when the AT&T analog shows up, it's just like, where the fuck did he come from?
Right.
Well,
Because
and
I like it felt like the egg guy, the Gentry, like they were the big bad guys.
But
And
then they
like
weren't.
it didn't feel like there was anything else, like
Right.
beyond what we'd already seen.
Yeah, that was like weird for me because obviously, we talked about the big egg guy being like a stand-in for like editorial or the company money, whatever, right? Like the thing that puts the boot on creativity or whatever. And for there to be this other bigger thing in the chair, and he's got like 10 of those flying around him, and the big purple thing that comes and attacks the base, that's the other big monster that they fight. There's like 2 or 3 of them in the background. So it's like, okay, if that's editorial or whatever, what is that, like the company? Is that DC?
Well, editors are essentially middle management at comic book companies, right?
Sure.
So your one editor is your like direct boss.
Yeah.
But behind that, there's actually a legion of editors who do what they do to you to everyone else.
Right.
And then there's someone or some people over top of them who make them do what they do to you.
Sure.
Perhaps, as Kale pointed out, AT&T.
Sure. Right.
I like that. No, I obviously didn't think of it as like the parent company, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense, though. There's also the other thing that I thought about was how it also has the gem on the forehead, similar to Ultra. So
Yeah,
it's
they
like
made the Ultra book.
Yeah, there's got to be some kind of through line there.
We see Nixie Watson in bed. He's reading all the comics that we just read. Yeah, that was his pull list this week.
And I love how he doesn't have money. Well, he does now, but he didn't have money to pay his rent, but he still bought comics.
My dude's still getting his books.
You gotta get your books.
Ain't that the struggle?
Ain't that the
That is
struggle.
500% me in college. Be like, if I eat ramen for a week, I can buy more comics.
Maybe that's me now. I don't know.
We kind of skimmed through some of our impressions on the art throughout the Multiversity, but is there anything you guys want to kind of really highlight here before we wrap up that we maybe kind of skimmed over?
Boy, it wouldn't be a DC crisis without Ivan Reis on the art, huh?
Yeah, that was awesome. I think that this book really is it's a showcase of DC's greatest strengths. DC's greatest strengths are the massive creativity that it takes to tell stories in this world that is so vast and unwieldy, with all these different multiverses that have their own identities, and to be able to synthesize that. What is every crisis, if not the rubber banding of all the stuff that happened leading up to the crisis that necessitated the crisis, right?
Yeah.
But then also, at least up until this point, DC has been known for a while to have the better artists. That was the thing in the 2000s, and some amount of the 2010s was that DC had the better artists and Marvel had the better writers. And I think that this series, I mean, it showcases, we get Jim Lee, we get Ivan Reis, we get Doug Mank, we get so many, Frank Whiteley, so many of the greatest
Cameron
artists
Stewart.
to ever work for DC Comics. So I think that when you say, Pete, that this is a love letter to, I think it was Pete that said this is a love letter to comics, I think that's absolutely true. And I would also say, even more specifically, it's a love letter to DC. Mm-hmm. And the culture of DC, what it's like to work for DC, what it's like to be a fan of DC, what it is that you like about DC and why. Mm-hmm. And all those things are put together, and Grant does an amazing job of synchronizing all of that. And hats off to every single creator who took part in this, because, it is hard to do this type of thing. What they do at DC is tough. Marvel has it easy. You got 616 and that's about it. So hats off. And, really it was a pleasure to read this, but also a tremendous pleasure to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the thing that you said there about, specifically the DC angle, I think the thing that has struck me the most over the last couple of years as I've like learned more about the history of DC is just how many companies DC has absorbed and then just rolled their shit in. And like Grant really does make it seem effortless. Like it all just fits. Like it's always been that way, you know? And that is really cool. And in terms of, you know, final thoughts on the art and everything, I think similar to, you know, what I appreciated about the scripting and it being a book that is like a love letter to comics, I think that you have art styles that run that whole gamut as well, cements that, you know, package where you do kind of get a flavor of stuff that does feel way more, you know, gold or silver age versus stuff that has that like late, you know, or not late 90s, but 90s to early 2000s, like grit and gritty type style, you know, like you get a lot of different flavors in the art as well. And it's funny because, you know, really no two of these issues look the same, but I think because of the fact that it's a story that spans universes and is supposed to be all encompassing, that weirdly makes it feel more appropriate. It gives each universe a real sense of, you know, self.
And credit to Grant, the writing in every issue, other than the ones that are directly linked together, all very different as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I might as well go into final thoughts here. Sean already went into what he was thinking. Kale, what are your final thoughts on Multiversity?
Yeah, this is a book that I was actually really, really excited to pick up when it came out. I have not touched it since it came out. I bought it and haven't opened it. Like I said, the only thing I read was the Thunderworld. But I'm very glad that I have now. There's something about books like this from Grant that intimidate me to a certain degree. And I still feel that with his more independent leaning stuff, like the later Invisibles and stuff like the Filth, the Nameless. That stuff that is just, I assume is just so out there because it's Grant. And this was one of those, and I'm very glad that I was sort of my hand, so to speak, was forced here.
Not empty though.
Not empty. But yeah, very glad I read it. I love Grant Morrison.
Yeah. What about you, Pete?
I would say I feel very similarly to Kale. I think overall, where this is a book that I was familiar with in like principle, right? Like the idea that, like, I know that Grant had a book where each issue was a comic in another universe and all that kind of stuff, and that sounded like this big unwieldy thing. And how do you do that? And in a lot of ways, it is. But I think that, as we've said before, and as we've said throughout this whole review, Grant, I think, is uniquely able to tell stories like that in a way that works. And I think, for me, I've never been shy about the fact that, like, sometimes Grant's flavor just isn't for me. But I think it's not because it's not good. It's not because it's something I, like, feel the need to pick apart and, like, actually people about. It's just, to me, it's that special sauce, and I want it on certain foods and I don't want it on others, And I think in this series, you really do get kind of the gamut of what Grant is capable of. And I think even if you're someone like me who is a little bit more hot or cold, there will be something among these 9 issues that you connect with, because, Grant's an extremely versatile writer, but I think the through line is that, they have a unique voice and really just love comics, I think, probably more than any other person that's ever written them. And deep, intimate knowledge and love of this stuff, which makes something like this feel more authentic and not feel like this editorial mandate, right? It's like this is just a story that Grant felt, you know? So while I can't say that the entirety of it worked for me, and I think it's a book that I would be hesitant to recommend,
Sure.
Unless I'm very intimate with your knowledge and your tastes and know that you're down for something that is going to confuse the shit out of you. But that's the thing. If that's what you want, then this is it. And nobody does it better. Literally no one does it better. So, while not all of it is to my taste, I think that there's a pretty objective mechanical strength across the board of this thing that I think even if it's not for you, that you'll appreciate if you've read a lot of other comics, you know, because this is something unique.
I did want to add.
I was going to say, go for it, man. I didn't really give you a chance to give you your full final thoughts.
Thank you. I so appreciate Grant Morrison. And when they hang it up, that's going to suck.
Yeah.
You know, it already kind of sucks that Grant doesn't do more work for DC. I personally would love to see them go back to Marvel. I know that's not going to happen, but that would be a dream come true for me, because when I was reading, when I started reading comics, Grant's time with Marvel was already over.
Mm-hmm.
So I only ever got to read that stuff retroactively, and that's a bummer. This book, I know at the beginning I said that my feelings would change. They changed in the middle. They've changed at the end. I love this. Unabashedly, wholeheartedly. This conversation was enriching, actually. And I'm so grateful that we did this. And now I don't regret doing a book club for my first reading of this book. Now I'm happy that I did. So this was a pleasure. Reading this was a pleasure. I wish there was more, but it's okay that there's not. I'm happy with what we got. And Grant's a comic book treasure. You know, if there were to be a Mount Rushmore of comic book writers, creators, even in general, I think, you know, the argument has to be made for Grant.
Mm-hmm.
So
as far as recommendations, I recommend this to absolutely nobody.
100%. Yeah. So I was just thinking on that note, do you think Marco would like this book?
Ooh, I have no idea.
I think there would be so much missing context.
Yeah.
That it would be tough for him.
Yeah.
But I think that he would probably be drawn in by just the raw creativity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the whole thing was like Multiversity 1 and 2 throughout, I would say no. But the fact that we have the Thunderworld stuff, we have Pax Americana, you know, we have the Nazi world stuff, like I think Marco would be sucked in by all that stuff. And like the glossary, like I think he would really have fun paging through that stuff and be like, oh, I want to read this thing.
Yeah.
And the same reaction we all had. It's funny. I was thinking while we're talking in our final remarks, I feel like we had the opposite reaction to last month's book club when we did Jupiter's Legacy, where some of us started out warmer on it, and by the end we got colder on it through discussion. This time I feel like all of us got warmer on Multiversity the more we talked about it.
Yeah. I definitely feel that way.
So it's pretty cool. If you guys don't have the deluxe hardcover edition that Kale kind of alluded to earlier, it's worth picking up because in the back there's this like so much about like the what went into the art, so to speak. Grant famously kind of draws what they have in mind, and that stairway scene that you talked about in Pax Americana, like Grant kind of outlined what they had in mind, and then Frank took it to another level. You kind of see how the dynamic works between the two. Just a lot of great stuff like that. Totally worth reading. As for me, I love this book. I loved it in 2015. This like 2015, like really amalgamated to like my like peak love of Grant, because I went back and around that time and was reading stuff I had never read before, like Animal Man, stuff like that. And yeah, I was on my third or fourth reread of All-Star Superman. So this coming out around then really was at a fever pitch for my worshiping of the altar, so to speak. And I really hope we get a Multiversity too, as it's been alluded. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but you know, here's hoping, because I would love more of these Earths explored.
I'll tell you what, I want Grant to write a movie for Captain Marvel that you then have the Spider-Verse guys anime.
Oh.
That's what I want now.
Captain Marvel as in
Shazam.
Captain Marvel. Oh,
No, like Shazam.
you're
Take the
saying
elevator pitch
Thunderworld.
that they wrote for this book and go make a movie with the Spider-Verse guys. You just
The
take that
real
one to the
Captain
bank.
Marvel.
That one's for free. You just take that, Grant. Just go ahead. Just do it.
That'd be so much fun. As for us, thank you for taking the time to listen to our hulking conversation at the beginning of the show. I told you about an hour and a half in that something bad would happen to you if you finished it. I hope you don't feel that way. Because if you did enjoy what you listened to, please go check out all of our episodes that drop every Monday on YouTube and wherever your podcasts are sold. Make sure you go check out our Discord. That'll be in the description. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And like I mentioned before, like and subscribe our YouTube channel. As for the rest of us, I'm Phil with the Comics Pals, and thank you for listening.
take care, guys.
Do you guys think you could listen to this episode in reverse and it would make sense?
No.